How are we doing, everyone? Welcome to the podcast. Today we're speaking with Vikki Seaton. Vikki is a colleague of mine and Vikki, you've been practicing a little bit longer than me.
Okay. How
Uh,
long have you been practicing for?
I've been at it for about 6 years.
Well, that's quite a long time.
Yeah. So,
I- Mhm.
I'm happy to have you on. I'm glad to have you on because, what, like I said to you, one of the main objectives of this was also for me to learn and for me to grow. In whichever way that I can. So having you on, you're a bit more experienced and you've got a lot of experience around intrusive thoughts and working with that. And that's been really interesting to me because the first podcast I did was with James Cormack on anxiety.
Mhm.
And, when I was telling my friends about it, I said, I'm doing a podcast on anxiety. And they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. I might watch that.
Mhm.
And what's been really interesting to me is that friends that I've asked, when's your next podcast? And I tell them I've got a podcast coming up with a colleague called Vikki Seaton who kind of specializes in working with intrusive thoughts. And the response I got was, oh yeah. And everyone I've spoken to seems to sort of have experience with that.
Mm. Yeah.
And an interesting question that they actually ask is, the thing is they didn't show as much interest for anxiety than they did for intrusive thoughts. And it's kind of a couple of them asked, what is the difference between anxiety and intrusive
Oh,
thoughts?
that's so interesting. I think
Isn't
the
it?
thing is that I think everyone, anxiety is my bread and butter. I think that most problems that people present with come down to anxiety, and I could, that word is so evocative, and everybody uses it in a different way, meaning a different thing. So I would never say that I have anxiety. I might say I have worries, I have fears, I think about things. But somebody else might call that anxiety. So anxiety is a big word. And the thing about intrusive thoughts, I think it's the same. I think we all have
It's
thoughts
similar.
that enter the mind.
Yeah.
And if you sort of think about it from a really like heavy psychological point of view, it could be like an OCD intrusive thought that means you have to do something, to act in some way, or some pain will be inflicted on somebody that you love. Sometimes that's the intrusive thought. Sometimes it's a very difficult, negative, dark thing. And sometimes it's just a thought that comes into the mind that you never invited, and it's there. And and I think it's much more common than people think. And it's just thoughts entering the mind. I was thinking about a metaphor many years ago. A friend of mine was talking about his garden, and he had weeds in the garden, but he quite liked them.
Hmm.
And they were, the pretty flowers, and he didn't mind them. He didn't want to take them out just because they were a weed. And he said to me, do you know what? I think a weed is a flower that's growing that you don't like, that's growing in the wrong place. And
Yeah.
I think intrusive thoughts are just thoughts. It's
Mm.
like the weeds, it's kind
Yeah.
of a thought that's come in that you don't want, wrong time, and it's beyond your control, it's unconscious.
Yeah.
So that's how I view intrusive thoughts, much more common perhaps than people think.
Yeah. I like that. I love that metaphor. It's something that I can, intrusive thoughts, resonates with me as well. And it's something that I come across a lot in my work, with people who are suffering with an addiction.
Yeah.
And what I find is that a lot of them find it very difficult to sit with themselves,
Yes.
because of intrusive thoughts, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and and they kind of they remedy that with substances or other behaviors. And I can certainly understand that. I've definitely been there myself as well.
Mm.
Because before I became a questie, I myself struggled with with substances and a little bit with alcohol as well. And really, the the alcohol that I used to drink was to silence
Mm.
intrusive thoughts, to help me sleep.
Mm.
The job that I was in at the time, I'd finish at sort of 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, and as soon as I used to finish, I'd go to the off license and buy some alcohol and drink it as quickly as possible to
Mm.
kind of knock myself to sleep, or just to quiet the intrusive thoughts. So yeah, that definitely resonates with me, and I think you know what is what's interesting is the thoughts that come up, isn't it? And a lot of the time they're very they're very irrelevant to what's going on in your life as well.
Mm.
Just things that you kind of catch yourself thinking, and then once you do, you're like, why am I thinking that?
Yeah.
Do you get
That,
that?
that's yeah. I mean, that's that. I also found that I think being a cognitive hypnotherapist is, for me, it's all about being curious, right? It's all about being curious about, and not, I think when you're not a cognitive hypnotherapist and you have an intrusive thought, and again, it depends on, if it's very facile, or if it's something that you feel is more something to fear, I guess. And there's sort of maybe two different things there. But I think if you're not a cognitive hypnotherapist and you have these intrusive thoughts, there may be a sense that it's just me. This doesn't happen to anybody else. And then there's, the matter of engaging with them. So kind of engaging with the thought, ruminating, sitting there. And, obviously we're here talking about addiction. And I think that, something that I learned from you is that, the alcohol or the addiction is kind of a symptom of something else. It's something that is taken possibly to numb something else.
Yeah.
And with regard to intrusive thoughts, yeah, for sure, alcohol is a way of making that not happen. But there are so many other ways. And I think that the first thing is making the unconscious conscious. So it's noticing, that's what I'm doing. I'm having this thought.
Yeah.
And that's number one. That's really important, and that's what I do with my clients first and foremost. Obviously, they've reached out for help, so they've made the first step. And clearly, if somebody's watching us, they're interested and they've taken the first step. But I think after that, it's kind of, or even before that, it's kind of noticing, this is what I'm doing. This thought is in my mind, and actually noticing quicker and quicker how you can begin to notice that. So the thought comes in and maybe you ruminate and then think, oh gosh, what am I doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then if there's an exercise to begin the process of not doing that anymore, it's kind of making that realization quicker.
Yeah.
Right. So the thoughts come in, right, now what do I do with it? And making the unconscious conscious. And then you have a choice. Do I engage with the thought, or do I find a way to not engage with the thought?
Yeah. It's interesting that you know when you say make the unconscious unconscious, make the unconscious conscious. Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of, going back to what I said about people being seeming really interested when I said I'm going to do this podcast, that the term intrusive thoughts, I think, is something that they hadn't heard before or thought about before. And just when I said intrusive thoughts, they kind of went into this sort of thinking state, thinking intrusive thought. I have that.
Yeah.
And just kind of realizing that they do have it. So sort of making the unconscious conscious. I think some people probably are unconscious of the fact that they're having intrusive thoughts. And how can somebody identify if this is happening to them?
Do I think it comes back to that metaphor with the weeds. If it's something that you like and it's in a place that you're happy to have it, there's no problem, right? It's when you have a problem with it that it's a problem. So, for example, and for me, I'm very interested in that. Many years ago, I experienced a trauma that we don't really need to go into now, but it was, it manifested itself as an intrusive thoughts. And for me at the time, it was a picture that went boom, like here, like a Venetian blind, I used to think, just, and it used to come and kind of just dangle here when I was trying to think, when I was trying to be present, when I was trying to do work, when I was trying to sleep, it was here. And it just popped out. Yeah, it sort of went
down
like that. And I think, everyone's different. So everybody has a different experience of that. And again, being curious, cognitive hypnotherapist, when somebody comes to me, I'm curious about how they do their intrusive thought, right? So how does it enter the mind? And if you were to close your eyes and think about it, you know, like the questions we always ask, the submodalities, the ways that people do their thinking. So, you know, if you were to close your eyes right now and something comes to mind, is it a mental picture? For example, for a start, is it visual? And if it's a visual in the mind's eye, is it in color or black and white? Yeah. Is it moving or still? Is there sound or no
These are the
sound?
submodalities that you're
All the
talking.
submodalities of
Just for the
thought.
listeners who don't know what
Yeah.
submodalities are.
So it's the way we do our thinking. And the funny thing is about thinking is I think that when people come to me, everybody thinks that the way that they think is the way that everybody thinks. And it's simply not true, you know? So for example, if somebody comes to me with intrusive thoughts, and that is their problem or part of their problem, you know, something has happened in their past and it keeps coming back, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, for a lot of people, that is the root of a problem. It's something that they can't shake. It's something that they can't shake off. And it's sort of helping them to be able to carry on their life without this thought coming at them. And I think the first thing that I try to find out is how they do that. So is it a visual in their mind's eye? Is, you know, as we said, is it in color or black and white? Is it moving or still? And, you know, even if you close your eyes and get a picture, is it a full picture, like a full picture in the mind's eye, or is it a little screen with the picture inside it? You know what I mean? I think people do. If you close your eyes right now and just think of what you had for breakfast, yeah, how do you visualize that?
I'm gonna do it.
Go on.
All right. Yeah. So my one is it's a moving image.
Okay.
And the thing that I had for breakfast is in color, and
Okay.
everything else is in black and white.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Super. And I mean, I can do it without even closing my eyes. And you know what? Eyes wide open works too.
And that says a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've cut you up there. I'm just thinking it says a lot because I do get quite focused on what I'm eating, and I could do with eating less. So the fact that that was in color and everything else was black and white, it is kind of me because I zone out when I'm eating. So
Okay.
that says a bit, doesn't it?
I mean, that is so key, you know, that you have this experience and this is your unique way of coming at your thoughts and your eating and your breakfast and your, you know, there's so much that tells us, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, so with intrusive thoughts, I'm really curious about how they present in the mind, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if we want to jump to ways to not have intrusive thoughts, but that, you know, that's my go-to. You know, if I don't want something to be hurting me, if I have a headache, I'll take a pill. Yeah. You know, if I have pain, I'll try and work out a way to not have the pain. And, you know, sometimes you do need to just sit with it. Yeah. Sometimes that is something that needs to be done. And sometimes there are tools and techniques that we can utilize and implement. And goodness, why wouldn't you, to try and not do that? And for me, with my traumatic experience of a few years ago when I had this kind of Venetian blind popping in, I volunteered for the trauma part of a training that I was doing on EFT, which we can go into now or later, or not at all if you don't want to. But EFT, emotional freedom technique, is a technique that I love because it was demonstrated to me in that instance. And I had a very learned practitioner who took that thought and asked me if I wanted rid of it. And I said, not completely. And she said, okay. And we came up with the idea that it would kind of be lifted and kind of put like a slide further back. So it didn't keep doing that. Yeah. So that was a very, very particular response that I had to the trauma and to the solution. And you know what? Through EFT, she took it and she put it further back in my mind, and it didn't bother me again.
Using EFT. EFT. Yeah, that's interesting.
So I believe in EFT, not for everyone. You know, nothing is for everyone. Yeah. But EFT is a solution of sorts to deal with intrusive thoughts for some people, right? And you and I both know that there are many tools and techniques that we can use. Yeah. So
Yeah.
mindfulness as well,
Yeah.
because
I
you
have been
can't
meaning to put up an EFT video actually. I think
integrate them
EFT.
to mine.
Yeah. Have you got one?
I've got one on my Instagram. Yeah.
All right, so we can put a link to that maybe, so people
Yeah,
can
for
have a look at it.
sure. For sure. You do one of your own as well.
Yeah,
um,
that's interesting. That's really interesting. Using EFT to get rid of intrusive thoughts and to
yeah, I
get
mean,
to the back of the mind.
yeah. I mean, the thing is that, I mean, when I see clients, I do, if it's appropriate, I do tend to explain a lot of these things to them, because uh, you can kind of see people nodding if they're interested. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's
Yeah,
amazing that we can do this and that, you can give this to someone. So I can empower you, by teaching you EFT, you then go off and do EFT. And the thing is that EFT or mindfulness or the breathing techniques that we utilize, they're not plasters. It's not just something that you can kind of put a band-aid over the problem in the moment. So, someone is experiencing these intrusive thoughts. Let's try one of these. It takes it away. Oh, but it's going to come back again, but then we'll do it again. That's not what this is about. This is about doing it over and over so that you're teaching the brain, that is what I want you to do with
yeah,
this now.
yeah.
Not this, but this,
So
right?
yeah, repetition's quite important.
Yeah, I think for another big word, neuroplasticity. So the idea that the brain is plastic and that the neural pathways and connections are forever moving and changing with every new learning that we have, for everything that we do, everything that we see, hear, touch, feel, creates a new neural pathway. And we can do that. And then this is one of the ways to do that. So, every time you have an intrusive thought, you tap using the EFT, and we can go into that some more. Or you utilize one of the other tools that we have, or just a different way of thinking that you may come up with that works for you. And then the more that you do that, the more that you create that new neural pathway, right? So
Yeah,
that, quicker than you might imagine, that you're not even aware that the thoughts entered the mind, because the mind has become used to doing this with it now. So it's not a problem anymore, right?
yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah. Definitely. You've got me thinking now. I'm off thinking about EFT.
Seeing the wheels turning. But you
Seeing the
see,
wheels turning. Yeah, you're seeing them.
I've said this to a lot of people, and I'm not sure it's the right thing for a therapist to say. I'm lazy. I am a lazy person. And when I'm making something in the kitchen and there's a recipe, if there's a massive list of ingredients, it's not for me.
Yeah,
I'm lazy. And so if I can find something that works, why would I not use it?
yeah, it's true.
And as I said, EFT is not for everyone. Mindfulness isn't for everyone. There's not one thing that is for everyone, but
Yeah.
actually there is
Mm.
something out there that's for you, right?
I vouch for EFT. I love it and I use it a lot as well. And I think it's really, really helpful. So I would definitely recommend anyone who doesn't know what EFT is, if you're interested, then definitely go down to the link and have a look at that video
Oh,
because
it's, they say about EFT, it takes like 10 minutes to learn. I think my video is about 10 minutes long. It takes about 10 minutes to learn, but then you have to take it inside, and you have to remember that you've got it. There's
yeah,
none of these things work if you
yeah,
forget to
yeah,
use them,
yeah.
right?
It does take commitment. It does take commitment. I mean, you've got it's something you've got to do every day. But I find it really useful. I mean, I use it myself as well.
Do you?
Yeah, I use it myself as well, and I find it really useful. I mean, I mainly use it when I've got high emotions.
Yes.
I mean, look, as therapists, we're not immune to anxiety. We're not immune to intrusive thoughts. We're
No.
not immune to negative feelings. And we do carry. I mean, one thing that we have to ourselves learn to deal with is carrying the weight of what we hear from clients, and we have to have a coping mechanism for that. I've early, and I had to learn this the hard way. And I've had clients before that have left me sleepless.
Mm.
Just the worry of, am I helping them? Are they doing okay? I wonder how their week has been. And EFT for me has always been a great way to sort of release that negative
To bring it
energy.
down.
Yeah, and
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 it's
that's
funny
how I
actually.
Sorry.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, that's all right. I kind of, I kind of see it as a way to release feelings, to
Yeah.
trapped feelings. And what I find, because it's quite meditative in nature, while you're doing that, you're removing these layers, and certain insights just pop up.
Mm.
It's a form of therapy as well, isn't it? Something that you can do on your own. Certain insights, wisdom, ideas just pop up from doing it, because you're looking inwards, and any time you're looking inwards is beneficial.
I heard something lovely the other day about to stop becoming and just be.
Yeah,
And I think you're right. I think EFT, it's for anybody who doesn't know, it's about tapping on energy meridians. And there are certain meridians that you tap on, and there's obviously more to it than that. But it is quite Zen-like, and it can kind of help you to kind of be.
yeah,
And through that being, there can be new thoughts and new realizations.
yeah.
It's funny, our friend Hugh Osborne once said something about the client thing. I'll tell you, your listeners, Hugh Osborne is another colleague of ours who also specializes in addiction. And I remember Hugh saying that he has a way of clearing after each client and before the next client, just as you said, to kind of shake off what is been in the room. But he actually does it after a positive session or a negative session. He does it every time. And I just thought that's so interesting, to sort of to shake off and clear, the good stuff too, so you can be present for the next person that comes into the room. So it's, we're always learning. We're always learning from our colleagues, and we're always learning from our clients. Goodness.
Yeah.
So much from the clients.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, even after a positive session. Mm.
So I think, as you said, I'm not sure that EFT needs to be done every day, but I think that things like this are useful exercises to strengthen that muscle, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, if you're talking about being rid of the problem that you've presented with, being rid of the problem that you've gone to the hypnotherapist to stop, I think that having these exercises to strengthen the muscle, I think it is something that needs to be done as a diarized, regular exercise. We exercise the body, and if you stop exercising the body for 3 days, I think it is, that it's, the muscle starts to waste away a little bit. It's much harder to get back into it. It's the same. Some people don't need to exercise the mind, or they're not aware that they're doing it, and some of us just do. And it's something that if you let that exercise go, you notice the negative effects. So it's paying attention to our mental health.
Yeah. Can you have positive intrusive thoughts?
Oh, yes. Well, I think that's just drifting off in your imagination, no?
Yeah.
And it's as I said,
drifting off somewhere else, isn't it? It's just,
well, for sure, that's autopilot. Then in mindfulness, that's what they call autopilot.
yeah.
Obviously sometimes it's not positive, but we're in autopilot. What is it? The scientists think 80% of the day we're drifting off. We're not present. We're not here. Mindfulness is about being more mindful, because you can't get in, ruminate and be up here if you're aware of your hands on the glass, if you're aware of your bottom on the chair. You come out of your own head to be mindful, and the more you do that, the more you're present for those around you. And I think for me it's healthier. I live inside my own head. I could be in there. I could set up a home in there. So for me, mindfulness kind of saves me, makes me a social being, which is healthier. Everyone's different. So some people don't live inside their own heads as much. But yes, positive, intrusive thoughts. I think the word intrusive, it's a negative thought, isn't it? They sort of intrude when you don't want them to. And, whether it's a positive or a negative, if you're supposed to be doing something else,
Yeah.
but you're up there with your thoughts, that's not good. So it's creating that space where you have a choice. Do I engage with the thought or do I not engage with the thought, right?
Yeah.
So having the thought is normal. It's normal. And I think people need to understand that. Having the thought is normal. What you do with it is that's the key.
Yeah, it's interesting. You really got me thinking already. I'm learning so much already, and yeah, I'm just thinking. It's got me thinking about negative intrusive thoughts and positive intrusive thoughts. And positive intrusive thoughts is kind
Mm.
of probably like a form of escapism, isn't it? When they're negative, you're kind of falling into a place that is probably not real.
Mm.
And if you're escaping into positive thoughts as well, and it's something that you're doing too often, then you're probably, at the same time, you're somewhere that's not real.
Yeah,
And
I
then
I
if you're
think.
thinking, I'm just thinking, what comes to mind is I don't play the lottery, but when I used to, I'd buy my lottery ticket and then I just spend like all this, and I think we all do this. Yeah, me and my friend used to do it as well. We'd sort of ring each other and say, right, I've played it, and we'd start, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to buy that and I'm going to give this much to that and this much to that.
Mm.
And you just go into this place, and then when you don't win, you kind of just back down to reality again. You're like, oh. Then you start thinking about negative things that are going on in your life and how
Mm.
difficult your life is. And, uh, what you're saying about, choosing whether to engage
Mm.
in that or not, I think is so important, isn't it?
It could be so pleasant. And I think, you know, we all we all experience intrusive thoughts in a different way, but then it could be like negative self-talk, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think of that as being an intrusive thought as well. But you could have, positive self-talk too. And that's, we all need to be inside our own heads a bit. I think that's healthy as well, to just be with yourself. And I think honestly that when you notice that there's a problem, that's when there's a problem,
Mhm.
you know. And if some people are very happy living a hermit-like existence, that they sort of err on the side of introvert, and
Yeah.
that is their normal, and that's fine. And if that works for them and they have a healthy lifestyle, there's nothing wrong,
I'm an
you know.
introvert. I don't, yeah, I'm not too keen on crowded places. I'm not too keen on idle chit chat, and I enjoy my own company.
Well, I crave my own company. If
Yeah.
I don't get my own company for a portion of the day, I go a bit nuts. But that is, something that I know now. So I build that. And I know if I don't get it, I'm not happy,
Yeah.
right? And as far as introvert extrovert is concerned, I'm right on the fence. So, some people do give me energy, some people sap me of energy.
Yeah.
Sometimes everybody's going to sap me of energy. Sometimes I'm in the mood for the crowd and sometimes I'm not.
Yeah.
And, and I think it's sometimes that's about, being quite self-aware,
Yeah.
right?
We always come back to self-awareness. Always comes back to self-awareness. It's so
Mm.
important, isn't it?
Mm.
Vikki,
Yeah.
in your professional experience, what are the most common types of intrusive thoughts that you come across?
I think negative self-talk is a biggie. Yeah, I
What
think
kind?
oh, it's, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I don't look pretty enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not successful enough. I'm not. And sometimes it is self-talk, and sometimes it's the voice of, I don't know, a figure from your past. And I think that maybe that sometimes that stops a lot of people from doing things that they desperately want to do because they're kind of talked down
Mhm.
by the intrusive voice, right? So when you talk about intrusive thoughts, as we said initially, sometimes it's visual, sometimes it's auditory, so in a way, like the talking about it in the therapy room identifies what is that, right? And really making something very abstract much more concrete, so you can do something with it.
Yeah.
The most common, I think, is when people ruminate and engage with the thoughts, it's either catastrophizing about the future, if you're talking about negative, or lamenting about something that's happened in the past, right? So we time travel, okay? Yeah. And there's loads of solutions for that. So I think most of the time when somebody comes into my room with a problem, it harks back to something that's happened in their past.
Yeah.
And that memory keeps coming, it keeps coming back, it keeps replaying. So that, for me, I think that's probably the most common intrusive, the way that the intrusive thought presents itself. Yeah. For somebody who has an anxiety, like a health anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder, there's a lot of catastrophizing about the future. Mm-hmm. So, you're talking about the lottery. Well, theirs is the negative, right? So, and they play out a whole story, a whole negative story about the future that's not happened. It's not real.
Yeah. And a lot of this, like you said, it does stem back to either childhood or a little bit further along. And it evolves so much over the years. A lot of people kind of become unaware that it does go back there, doesn't it? I mean, it happens a lot when you have someone in the therapy chair and you kind of go back in time. We follow that feeling or those thoughts back to a first event, and they become really surprised that it's gone back so far. Because a lot of people there, and a lot of us, we have what we think were happy childhoods, and we think that we kind of grew up normal. We all have stuff that happens to us when we're kids, and going back doesn't mean that we had a bad upbringing or we had bad parents or anything. But I mean, how important do you think it is for people to sort of be willing to go back? And
do you know what, though? It's funny because I've been doing this longer than you, but you've been doing it for years and years. So I think we've both taken a lot of people back to the significant emotional event, back to the memory, right? And I've never had, I think people understand when you explain to them that most problems that people come with are as a result of something that happened in their childhood, and sometimes before they were 5 or between 5 and 10. I've never had somebody surprised. Actually, I think it's much rarer that somebody presents with a problem that's happened midlife, right? Yeah. And it's usually a response to something that's happened midlife that is similar to something that happened when they were 4 or 5 or between 5 and 10, because we're shaped, and the brain is so difficult to fathom, right? There's so much we don't understand. So, that a child would take a seemingly insignificant memory and it becomes something that is a problem, and then their brother or sister or best friend that was there at the same time doesn't do that, right? So what's that about? Yeah. And is that, and does it matter? Does it matter? I'm noticing my color is kind of changing wherever I go. I don't know if that's distracting for people.
I think it's the clouds going by, and
I think you're right. I'll try and stay still. But as I said, I think that the addiction is the well, it's how I understand it. It's the anesthetizing of something. If that's what they're trying to do, to anesthetize the problem. So for that moment, it's numbed and they don't need to deal with it anymore. And I think I heard from you or from someone else, I think it was from you, that the intrusive thoughts, might not just be the way that I experience them. I mean, clearly the experience that I had a few years ago, I didn't turn to alcohol, but I could have, right? I didn't turn to drugs. I went a different route, but it was clearly for a time not something that I could deal with, right? It was really, really distressing to have this literally obliterating my vision, So I can imagine if it is that for someone else, you'd do anything to not have that happen anymore, right? And if people are watching this and they know that there are ways, really powerful, simple, powerful, natural ways to not have that happen.
Yeah.
Why would you not? Yeah.
What
Why
was your
would
process of overcoming that without getting into it, without getting into the event itself?
well, as I said, I was in there volunteering for the trauma workshop in an EFT training. So my
Was it done by a
process,
Questie?
no,
Oh, okay.
actually, I think it was before Quest.
Okay.
Yeah, it was before Quest. I'd done a year of psychotherapy, like a foundation course, and
Yeah.
trying to figure out which approach to go down. I thought Gestalt was amazing. I did a Gestalt weekend
Oh, wow.
as well, which is like a
Yeah.
different form of therapy, which I loved. And actually, do you know what it was? I was training to be a hypnobirthing practitioner, which I did for a while.
Mhm.
And during the hypnobirthing training, I met a naturopath who did EFT, and we chatted about it. So I did an EFT workshop. So you know what? You learn through
Yeah.
meeting people, yeah.
So what
And
made the difference for you is EFT.
yeah, well, I mean, I do love it. But there are people that only do EFT, EFT master practitioners, they just get in there and tap. But there's so much more to it. And it is also, taking a history from the client. So sort of trying to figure out, how you do your problem, when you do your problem, when you don't do your problem, when it started, how you see it in your mind's eye. So this, as when we first meet someone, when they first come into the room or online, there's 90 minutes of questions and answers and forming a picture and getting under the skin of how they do their problem.
Unpacking it.
Yeah, for sure. And making the unconscious conscious, so asking all the questions. And then from that very first session, if somebody's not thought about their problem in that way, from that very first session, things start to change because you've unraveled the mess. So but I guess that's my process, unraveling the mess. Going back to the question you asked about 15 minutes ago.
No, that's all right. I think do you know what? I think that people might be interested to learn, because I mean you've trained so much in so many different things, and obviously you've trained cognitive hypnotherapy, which is great as well, and you've lived the life as a therapist until now, and that's probably really been helpful for you as well.
Yeah.
And I think as someone who now I don't know what happened to you, and I'm not going to ask you, where that trauma came from, but I think a really important question would be, how has your life changed since dealing with that?
I think maybe we're off topic, but I think go on.
On topic.
Okay. No, I don't know. I think that, we're all different.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm probably fairly different to a lot of people. And I know through my studies with Quest to become a cognitive hypnotherapist, I know that the message, the voice in the head, audio digital is what we call it, is kind of me. I can live up there quite contentedly, but that's not a social animal. That is not a family. You can't conduct your life up in your head all the time. So I recognize that. So what I've learned through all my studies and things is kind of who I am and how I come at things, right? And I'm curious, there's that word again, but I am curious as to how people do their problems. And, in all the years of doing this, I do explain it before I jump into it, but if I say to somebody, is your memory in color or black and white? That's nuts. When somebody has an emotion, and that's so abstract, but you can feel it in the body. The mind and body are connected. And you know what? When somebody's feeling a sadness or distressed or or upset, and they feel it in their body, and then you say to them So that feeling were to have a color, what color would it be? And if that feeling were to have a shape, what shape? And, you know, I explain it first, and I do say it might sound a bit strange, but everybody kind of gets it because it makes sense in a kind of weird sort of way. And, you know, for me, I love that. I love the playfulness of what we do, and using the imagination in a really powerful and positive way to change the way you feel about it. I always say to my clients, you know, it's either or you know, it could be both changing the way things are or changing the way you feel about them, right?
Yeah.
And if you can't change the way things are, what are you left with? If you have to change the way you feel.
Yeah.
And that's only going to come about by changing what's going on up here.
Yeah.
So
that's the submodalities that you're talking about, like for people who are listening, because it might sound strange to them, doesn't it, when you're asking what color a feeling has, or what an image looks like. Is it black and white? Is it moving? Is it color? So these are submodalities. These are how these experiences are made up, right? And Trevor talks about this. Trevor Sylvester is the founder of cognitive hypnotherapy, and in his book, he talks about this. He talks about these problems kind of being like a constellation. Yeah. So when you look up at the stars, you see constellations, and you know the dots connect to form a picture.
Yeah.
And one dot might be that the image is in black and white. Another dot might be the feeling and where you get it. Another dot might be the experience, the significant emotional event that caused a sort of a cascade of things to happen to lead to you being anxious or having these intrusive thoughts. And when we look at these submodalities, as we call them, by playing with them and moving them around or removing them altogether, we kind of disrupt that picture, don't we?
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's, you know, for me, it's a playful thing.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, asking a client, you know, why would you not try everything? Let's throw everything at it. Yeah. If we're going to go down the submodality route, if that is a way in to kind of change the way that the client feels about it, to try and get a mental picture of this memory, for example, that is the intrusive thought that keeps coming into their mind. And if it's in color, right? What happens if you change the color? Yeah. And the thing is, with my clients, with their eyes closed, we've been talking for a while. So there's rapport, you know, there's trust, and they feel safe. So their eyes are closed. They're in with the memory, but they're kind of hovering above the memory. I never kind of dump my clients into a negative memory. It's always above the memory, looking down on it. And the thing is, you know, so if you were to change the color, I always assume that they can do that. You know, so if you were to change the color from, you know, this red, how would you know, what would you do? No, actually, what I say to the client is just do that and let me know when it's done. That's what I say. And, you know, or to make it smaller or bigger. So you're just playing with the memory, like really taking the memory and playing with it. And then how do I feel, right? So we've had the client kind of scale how the memory makes them feel in the moment as they're sitting in the chair. And then they change something. And as I said, I always assume that they can, you know, just do it. Let me know when it's done. I've never had somebody tell me they can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, if they're a visual person, most people are. Yeah. Some people do not get a visual in their mind's eye. Then we just play with the feelings. We play with the sounds. We play with whatever they show up with. But just for ease of explanation. So they change the color, and then, you know, is it still making them feel the same way? So where is it on the scale? And if it's come down on that scale of discomfort, that's great. We've tapped in the right place. Let's try something else. Let's do the same again. Yeah. And if it's not made a difference, then what can you do to make the difference? So if there's no sound, give it a sound. Yeah. If it's you know, change it to black and white. There's so many different techniques that we can use, you know, the rewind and you know, so many different techniques that we can use. So the thing is that what you've got to deal with this intrusive thoughts problem is you've got the things that we can empower our clients to learn and take away with them, right? So there's EFT, there's mindfulness, there's breathing, there's, a million others. So if that's their bag and they'll use it and take it away and practice, so much the better. That's super. In the room with me and you, we do other things, right? So I can teach you that technique and you then take it away, run with it, and then you have that forever. Any other problem, and let's face it, life is full of them. Any other problem that comes your way, you can use what you've learned. How amazing is that? That's a gift. Here's a gift. So, but in the room, we can do other things, right? So we can play with whatever, like Trevor says, we're water, we can play with whatever comes our way. And the thing is that the best solution for the client is the one that comes from the client. Yeah. So, no, it's nice to have the sun coming in on your face.
But when it comes in, it just looks too bright.
See me. So I've had clients in the room, and we have a way, don't we, of speaking with the client where you don't give them the solution. You ask them what's going on. So I've had clients come into the room where, they feel blocked, for example, and, or there's like something going on inside of them. And, most people, if they close their eyes and think about what's blocking what, there's something there. It's real, And for example, I think I once had somebody talk about their stomach felt like it was tied in knots. Okay, super. So what's tight? Where's the knot? And it was this massive, my mental picture of it was clearly different to their mental picture, but the way I understood it was a big hollow kind of piece of equipment that a builder might leave on a building site, and that was in their stomach, and then we sort of either did some tapping or we talked about it, breathing, and tried to, I think I'd said to them, I've had so many people with so many things that they've imagined being inside of them, and it's real, it's real for them. If you feel that there's a big heavy brick in your stomach, right, okay, so there's a big heavy brick.
Let's connect with that.
Who am I to say there's not a big heavy brick in your stomach? So what's the first thing you'd like to do to not have it in your stomach? Is, for example, what do you want? Do you want that brick? No. Do you want it gone completely? Possibly. Right. So what's the first small thing that you could do to change that? Right. And they may take this big piece of rope that the builders left on the site in their stomach and change the color of it or the shape of it, or maybe make it into something different. And the best, as I said, the best solution comes from the client themselves. And invariably they do come up with, I've really honestly never had somebody say, I don't know. Right.
Again, it just comes back to self-awareness, doesn't it? It's just connecting with yourself. If it's your stomach you need to connect with, let's conceptualize what that thing is that's going on with your stomach. Let's connect with it and move it around and work with it.
And the other thing that we do, isn't it, is it's kind of taking the client's language, right? So, this first session that we have is to work out how they do their problem, right? It's to work out, for me to get under the skin of what's going on for them, right? So, I've always taken a million notes, and I rarely reread the notes, but in taking the note, it helps. That's something else I've learned about myself. When I write the note down, it helps it to go into my head so I can remember their story and I can kind of remember what's going on for them. And, I think using their language, for somebody, it might be a knot. For somebody, it might be a block. For somebody, it might be a voice. So it's always taking what's going on for them, because they are completely different to the person that came before them and the person that will come after them.
It's interesting that you said that. It reminds me. I did tell you about this. I spoke with somebody about this podcast and that I was going to see you, and this person said that they had intrusive thoughts and they conceptualized them as like two demons in their head.
Oh, right.
And they were aware that they're not. It's not them. It's not this person. It's not me. These demons are separate to me. And when they start getting these intrusive thoughts, it's like the demons wake up.
Okay. So then I see instantly my mind is like,
Yeah, you
the
want,
wheels
and
are turning.
it's difficult to give an answer because you haven't got that person in the chair in front of you.
For sure. But, I think of NLP, and neuro-linguistic programming for people who don't know NLP. But I think, we've learned NLP, but I think for me, I don't know about you, it was so long ago that I don't know now whether what I do is NLP or something else, But I do remember with NLP that, it's all behavior has a positive intention, right? So I always think the first place I go with the demons is, when did they come?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they there? Right?
Mm.
Because you and I both know that the unconscious mind is there to protect us, right? Sometimes it goes about it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Okay. So the demons, demons are pretty negative in my bag, in my head. I think of the word demon, it's quite
It's
negative.
extreme.
Right. So I'd first of all clarify with the client that it's a negative.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, because the thing is, and I've also had clients who've had demons or sort of entities going on in their mind. And but for some it's kind of a naughty child. For some it's it's a parental figure. For some it's there's a lot to that. And I would never presume that the demon is kind of a two-dimensional negative thing that we need to get rid of. And the first thing is honor the client, so what do you want to do with these two demons, right? And almost communicate with them, like work out why they're there, what's their intention. Yeah.
Supervision.
Hmm?
Under supervision.
What do you mean?
Like, probably best done with a therapist, with
Oh yeah,
a
for sure.
professional.
Well, yes, but I think we can all lean in to the thoughts that are going on for us. It's funny actually. I learned something the other day from Instagram. I commented on a post that I saw, and I had a lot of people comment on my comment. And it was with regard to anxiety, actually. And a lot of people said that their way of getting over anxiety, and this was kind of without the help of therapists, I think, or maybe with, but all different, was to sort of engage with the feeling rather than the thought, right? And they found that letting the thought drift, but the thought manifested itself in a feeling in the body. This is anxiety. And when they engaged with the feeling and tried to do something with the feeling, they felt it more positive at bringing down the anxiety than engaging with the thought. Engaging with the thought for most of those people was not helpful, right? So when we talk about demons in the mind, I think it's about being curious, right?
Yeah.
It's reaching out for help if you feel that there's a problem. And and I think just being curious about what's going on. And I think too, sometimes when we try to distract ourselves from what's going on, it's like a toothache, right? If I don't know if you've ever had like a really bad toothache. I a few years ago had one, and you try to distract yourself, and in distracting yourself, what happens is the pain just gets worse, and it's everywhere. I think they call it referred pain. It's everywhere. It's like the whole jaw is on fire. But when you lean in slightly to the pain, right, you realize it's really just on one part of the gum, on one tooth. It's not the whole jaw. So I think sometimes leaning into the pain and being curious is the first step in changing it.
Mm-hmm.
And and maybe the distraction is alcohol or drugs or or something else negative. Some people turn to exercise, some people turn to food, maybe that's distraction of sorts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect sense.
Right.
Perfect sense. And
Colour.
I agree completely. And, I'm so glad I've got you on because I'm learning so much as well. Like what I'm hearing here is that the mind is a manifestation of the body.
Yeah, and the body's a manifestation of them. They're both
They're
connected.
both, and I think, yeah, the mind is a manifestation of the body, and the body is a manifestation of the mind. I,
there's
there's a
got to be a
middleman though.
connection there. Hmm?
Is there a middleman? And I think
Oh,
that there is a middleman, and I think could that be experience?
oh, that's such a good thing to think about. A middleman. Wow. Um, I guess
Whether it's a past experience, whether it's something that you're going through now,
for some people,
and I think
maybe,
that awareness, when you bring your awareness and your attention to the feeling,
yeah,
I think a lot of the time it will lead you there, won't it?
yeah,
What the experience is, why am I feeling like this? As we ask, what's that about?
yes. And how can I use it?
Yeah, where's it coming from? Why is it there?
Mm. But you
Yeah,
know what? I think also for some people, they don't care why it's there. They just want it gone.
yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think we've got to honor that as well. I think some people don't care where it came from, right? Obviously going back to the first significant emotional event and reframing it is kind of what's my go-to. It's kind of the first thing that I do usually with people, but sometimes that's not what they're open to. And I think I can't tell somebody to be into something that they're not. So it's about honoring, what, if somebody's watching this, you are important and you are the expert when it comes to you, right? And, we are catalysts for your change. That's what we are. And yes, we've got knowledge, but you've got knowledge, and my job is to understand your knowledge so I can help you
mm,
to do what you do better and to change. And I think why I love what I do, it's kind of it's real curiosity, that word again, but it's a curiosity for people and their heads, and that brain is crazy. I once had an amazing client who sort of she knew that she held all of her stress in her stomach, and she used to push it down. I mean, she did this without anybody telling her to do it. She'd push it down, so she had problems with her feet. And you know
wow,
and I think she was once talking to a friend, and they got onto the subject, and she said to her friend, well, what do you do with your problems? Her friend thought she was nuts. But this is what we do, is we sort of may take something quite mental and make it physical so
hmm,
you can change it, or take something physical and make it mental so you can change it. I'm curious as to what comes first,
yeah,
chicken or egg, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
if that even matters.
yeah. Does it even matter?
Yeah.
That's interesting that she felt it in her feet, and
Isn't that, isn't
yeah,
that
you're right.
mad?
Yeah, again, I mean, a really interesting conversation with James Cormack. I don't know if you've seen it, if you've had the chance to watch it. He had some really interesting symptoms. He had anxiety. The symptoms were so far from what we know of anxiety that he never guessed that that's what it was. And after
Yeah.
having so many health checks, one doctor finally said to him that I think you've got anxiety. And his symptoms were so far from what we know of anxiety that it actually upset him, it angered him,
I
and he
remember.
thought,
Yeah, I saw
yeah,
that.
and
That's
yeah. So
mm,
these feelings are also, they can be a sign, can't they?
right. Yeah, I remember him
Psychogenic
saying that.
symptoms. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I find anxiety is it's a fascinating thing. I think where I am, maybe straying way off subject, but where I am as a woman of a certain age, there's a lot of talk on menopause, and perimenopause and menopause can be there's a lot of anxiety that comes about in people who've never experienced it before as a result of those hormonal changes. And yeah, I think menopause is the same actually as anxiety. Like the more that you hear about the physical and mental symptoms, the more you think, oh my goodness, could be anything, it could be everything.
yeah,
And I think, sometimes that's a blessing and sometimes it's a curse, because sometimes an itch is just an itch. Sometimes a rumble is just a rumble. Sometimes it's not anxiety. Sometimes it's not menopause. It's just a thing. And, and the hanging on to it manifests and makes it worse. Anxiety feeds on itself, right? So, I think that, I don't know what we do with that, but, if it's helpful for you to think of it as being anxiety, then that's great. And if it helps you to change it and make it less onerous, then that's great. But if it just makes you more anxious, maybe it's not so great. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm always curious about these diagnoses. I think sometimes when you put a label on something, it's really helpful. And sometimes when you put a label on something, it draws attention to things that actually is like a thought. And if you just come back to the breath, it goes. Yeah. And you don't need to pull it down and call it anxiety and take it. Yeah. Or maybe that's just me, but that's why I listen to my clients. And
I once heard Trevor say, my truth is that nothing is true. So
we made it all up.
So it's just looking in, isn't it, and identifying if it is a problem for you, whatever the symptom is, because we all experience it in such different ways.
And and again, yes, if it's anxiety or whatever we choose to call it, and it's a problem, and you want it gone, then it's figuring out what works for you to take it away in a healthy way, right? So again, not turning to substances and not turning to things that are detrimental to our health, but finding a way to get it gone, and then doing that as many times as you need to change the message in the brain. There's a cool lady who I always tell my clients about, nearly always, called Melissa Tears, who I saw speak at the National Council for Hypnotherapy conference a few years ago. And she's American. She's from New York. And I can't do a New York accent, but I will try. But she talks about roadblocks. And this is neuroplasticity. It's putting up a roadblock. So she's got a little book on anxiety that I've given to a lot of people. Always thought I should write my own, because it's a very simple thing. It's just, these are all the different techniques that you can utilize. Throw everything at it, find the one that sticks, use that little shiny new toy over and over to put up the roadblock. Yeah. So to change that neural pathway, to keep telling the brain how to do it the way you want it to do it. And I love thinking about it in that way, because then it's cumulative. Yeah. It's like every time I tell the brain, I don't want you to engage with that thought. Every time I tell the brain, just come back to the breath. Every time I tell the brain to, I'm going to be mindful, I'm going to notice what I can see and hear and feel, and not the thought. Yeah. For as long as I need to do that. And if I do it for 30 seconds and the thought comes back, that's fine. I've done it for 30 seconds. And the next 30 seconds builds on it. Yeah. It's a lovely way to think about it. It's like every time I try to do the right thing, it's making it better and better at helping me.
When you say come back to the breath, can you give us a bit more context on that?
So, well, that's mindfulness, isn't it? So it's meditation, but it's kind of a piece of meditation that's come into the zeitgeist that, if you Google mindfulness, I'm sure you'll find a billion hits. And if you don't know about mindfulness, it's about coming out of your own head. So in mindfulness, they call being in your own head autopilot, which I guess is trance. I mean, that's the trance state that we utilize, is autopilot. But mindfulness is about coming out of your own head. And generally, the way that people do mindfulness is they focus on the breath, because we always have the breath. It's always there with us. So that's generally the way that mindfulness works. And people go on 8-week mindfulness courses, which I've done, and it's amazing. But there are different ways to do it. There's the Headspace app. I'm sure there's other apps as well. So it's about noticing the thought, and it takes practice. Yeah, you start with like 10 minutes a day of just sitting, and
Eyes
you notice
closed.
the thought.
Eyes closed.
Yeah, Yeah, you really sort of, and sitting on a chair, like not lying down, being awake and aware, and noticing the thought as it comes. And I think of them as being like clouds in the sky, and the cloud just floats, and we can engage with that thought, or we can choose not to. So it's noticing the thought, and then just bringing the mind back to the breath. And I've actually got another video on my Instagram where I talk about how to think of the breath, so you can do that more easily. So for some people, it's about thinking about where the breath is. So if you think about where you're breathing from right now, for me, it's right here in my chest, but for some people, it's higher or lower in the stomach. So without judgment, just thinking about where the breath is coming from, the pace of the breath, so you can count the breath. And that's one way to keep your mind on the breath for a little bit longer, is in for 1, out for 2, in for 3, and we go all the way up to 10, and then go back to 1 again. And then you'll notice the mind wandering again, because that's what the mind does. Yeah. And you bring it back to the breath.
Each time you just bring it back.
Sorry?
Each time you just bring it back to the breath.
Just bring it back. Another way to think about the breath is to think about the breath as having a color. Now, it's funny because I put this on my Instagram, and I had somebody message me or put a comment on to say, well, I'd never thought about the breath as having a color. That's weird, and the thing is, maybe my clients were just being polite, but I've never had somebody in the room say that. Most people can come up with a color. As you breathe in, the breath it's like cool, because you're breathing in the air from the room, and when you through your nostrils, and if you breathe out, the breath has warmed up from the body. And most people can kind of think of the breath as having a color as you breathe in, and maybe it changes as it circulates around the body, and then when you breathe out, maybe the breath is a different color. So it's just, if you can't imagine that, that's fine. Do something else. It's just a way to keep the mind on the breath, because when you're thinking about the breath, you're not engaging in the thoughts, right?
And it's practice.
It's practice. Oh, for sure. Yes, for sure.
What I see it like, so I'm one of those people who wishes that I meditated every day. But I
you
don't.
Wish you do, but you don't.
and what I find, the way I kind of see it is, when I don't meditate for a long time and then I meditate, it's like, when you go on holiday and then you come back and you got this big pile of letters behind the door, and you have to sit there and you have to sort of sort through them, right? That's rubbish, that can go in the bin, or that's important, or don't know what that is, or that's for the next door neighbor.
Yeah.
I find meditation like that as well. When I first tried to do it after a long time, there are just more thoughts, and it takes a little bit more time to sort of settle into it, and it's kind of like you're sorting them out.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it's something like the Headspace app, and I do direct people to that, because I think it's he talks, right? Andy Puddicombe, however you pronounce his name. He talks, so it's guided. So you're listening to the sound of his voice and the meaning of his words, and you're not floating off in your own thoughts, right? Yes, I mean, it takes practice for sure. And I think, if you're going to do like a dedicated mindfulness practice, it's 10 minutes a day, and then it goes up to 15, and then it goes up to 20. And, and there are different, I think with the Headspace app, it's been a while since I've listened, but they start with a scan of the body. So you start, I think, from the top down, without judgment, just thinking about the parts of the body and noticing, what's going on, but without lingering and without judgment. So there's lots of different ways of keeping the mind away from the thoughts and bringing it back after, but as you say, it takes practice, and it's one of those things, if you don't practice and if you don't use it, it won't work. But if you do, I've never had someone actually do a dedicated practice of mindfulness and not get benefits. Never. And for some people, and it has benefits in so many different ways, with sleep and intrusive thoughts, for sure, and just general mental well-being, mental health. The benefits are far-reaching. And for me, the person that lives inside their head a lot, being mindful, being present, being a parent and a therapist, amazing. because you can't be absent. You can't be in your own head with a child.
Mm-hmm.
They know instantly that you're not there, right? And obviously, if you're with a client, I mean, that would be awful. I'm totally there for my client, and actually having a dedicated 60 or 90 minutes of being present. Oh my goodness, do I feel good when I come out?
Yeah.
Right? That's longer than any mindfulness
Yeah.
exercise. So you can imagine the benefits, you know. So yeah, but it takes practice. And I think if you start a mindfulness practice 10 minutes a day, up to 15, I think 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks until you begin to see, you know, you've got to be in it to win it.
Yeah.
You know, 2 to 3 weeks before you begin to see any benefit, you know, and you will see benefit. But, you know, all these things it's a decision to change, and then it's a bit of work. Yeah. And as I said, I am lazy. So I've sort of found my shorthand way of doing it. So I can be mindful with my coffee in the morning, you know, but I have done the course, and I do know about it, and I do read about it because I think it's interesting.
That's amazing. You know, I one thing that I wanted to do with this podcast is everyone I speak to is at the end to ask them for one sort of free technique or one free piece of advice. But you've just done that throughout the whole thing.
I've done loads.
You've given loads. EFT, which you've got a video of,
Yes.
and mindfulness, which is really helpful. Anyone watching, yeah, I totally recommend that as well. And this has been amazing. I've learned so much from you. I've loved listening to you,
Thank you.
honestly. And do you give free consultations?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yes. I mean, to be honest, I don't really call it that. I think I maybe was talking to somebody else about it. I'm not a salesperson.
Oh, okay.
I'm a therapist. Do you know what I mean? Like, as a therapist, I'm not a marketeer. I'm not a salesperson. So I don't call it that. But what I do call it is trying to impart as much information and to find out a little bit about what's going on for you, client. Yeah. And to tell you about trance, right? Because I have to get rid of that idea that it's a state that I put you in. You know, people misunderstand trance. So I always explain trance before the client comes into the room for a session or online, because that's just a waste of time. So my initial consultation, if you like, is getting all the questions out the way. Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to them on the phone, or we'll do a Zoom for like 20 to 30 minutes. And in that time, I find out a little bit about what's going on for you. I form some opinions and thoughts. I take some notes, and I tell you about my note-taking fetish. And, you know, and I tell them about trance. I tell them about my process. And then I invite them to do a bit more research to figure out if I'm definitely for them, right? Because we've got to have rapport. It's got to work. And so, yes, I mean, that doesn't cost anything.
Yeah. Conversation of discovery.
Yes, yes. And, you know, it's lovely. And, you know, sometimes people realize that it's not their time. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, they're not invested. It's not going to work because it's not their time. Mm-hmm. And that's fine, you know. And sometimes, usually, you know, we make an appointment to have that first 90-minute session. And the way that I work is that I take it a week at a time. I know that, you know, maybe for you, actually working with addiction is different because you're sort of looking for an investment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, and certainly if I was to have somebody where I would need them to be totally committed and invested for a period of time, I would talk to them about that. But generally, when I see people, it is a week at a time, but I ask them in their heads, at least, to commit to 3-4 weeks minimum. So we know that the change is lasting.
Yeah.
And we know that this generally is brief therapy, but, you know, and it's very transparent. Yeah. So every week I start with what's changed, because it can that quickly, what's stayed the same, what's different, you know, and where do we go next? Yeah. And then at the end of the session, I ask, right, should we make another appointment? That's always the way that I've worked. It's what sits right with me. And it generally tends to work with my clients. And then, you know, they get what they came for. Yeah. And they go off and live their lives.
got me wanting to work with you. But yeah, look, anyone who's watching this who has enjoyed listening to Vikki as much as I have, all of her details will be in the description.
Thank
So
you.
you can get in touch with her. Her Instagram tag will be there as well. And that's, you're just on Instagram, aren't you? You don't do Facebook, or
I have got a Facebook for business page. I'm not very good with
it's kind
it.
of more on Instagram at the moment.
More on Instagram at the moment, for
There
sure.
you
But
go.
people can, like, on Instagram is my link to my to my website, and actually I think through Facebook it's there too. I'm not sure, but yeah, Instagram's where to find me and my website.
Good.